Comic Book Savant, episode 368.
I know this. This I know. All that I have, all that is me, resides inside my poetry. And every time I write a rhyme, it might be the line that sets minds free. And also, I know that I don't.
Welcome to the Comic Book Savant podcast. I'm your host, James Harris. This week is going to be the first part that will be a 5 or 6 part series before it's all said and done, counting down my top 50 comic book movies of all time. I kind of got inspired from the Collider Video YouTube channel and website. They did a top 50 where they went through their staff and they voted on the top 50 movies, superhero / comic book movies. I thought it was a cool idea to kind of piggyback off of because I've done a ton of different countdowns in relations to some of my favorite movies, like top 10, top 20, but I never did a, countdown of like my top 50 all time. And, for the longest time, we didn't have enough movies to do a top 50 countdown. But since the comic book and superhero movie as a genre has grown so tremendously, and we've had so many movies released over the past 10 years, it really has grown where I could do a proper full-on countdown of some of my greatest movies my favorite movies of all time. So it's going to be totally based on my personal opinion. I started doing a countdown, kind of overlapping theirs. They did their whole thing running through the end of last year, and it kind of prompted me. I went back and I watched movies. I took it ultra, seriously, trying to go back and how would I actually rank these movies, because I didn't particularly ever really thought about it in any serious type terms, because there's just been so many movies, and as fans, we just kind of enjoy them as they come. But it forced me to kind of, want to dig down deep and examine them. But before I get into more of how I came up with the whole concept to do this new series, as always, I'd like to give a shout out to my friends over at the Comics Podcast Network. You can find them over at comicspodcast.com. Just a great place if you like what I do here and you're looking for more comic book related podcasts. It's a one-stop destination for you to go to find more content. It's just a one-page portal where literally hundreds of different podcasters come together on there, so you can stop there, and if you like comic book related content, you can find it all in one nice neat place. And I mean, you can find a single person podcast like myself. You can find roundtable discussion podcasts. You can find ones on particular publishers. It's publisher specific, team specific, character specific. It all is whatever strikes your fancy, but it's a large variety. That's why I love to recommend it, and it's a great place to go. If you're in this genre, you want to find more podcasts to listen to, or even video shows to watch, you can all go there and check out the Comics Podcast Network over at comicspodcast.com. A great one-stop resource for, any content you're looking for when it comes to comic book related podcasts and entertainment shows. And last but not least, I'd like to give a shout out to my sponsors, which is InStockTrades.com, one of the best places you can go online when it comes to finding collected editions. If you're looking for omnibuses, Marvel Masterworks, your standard trade paperbacks, deluxe editions, absolute editions, you name it, they have it. They're pretty much, when it comes to finding collected editions, next to something like Amazon, which has everything, they're pretty much the one-stop shop when it comes to finding comic book collected editions. They have discounts ranging from 35, 42, up to 50% off with their deals of the week. On their homepage of InStockTrades.com, they have a section that they update weekly that has books discounted 50% off. And they have a pretty good selection, and it rotates weekly, so it's always being updated with new deals. If you're a U.S. customer and you place an order of $50 or more, and you are, again, a U.S. based customer, you get free shipping within the U.S. But again, it's only for U.S. based customers. But if you happen to listen to this and you're interested about trying InStockTrades.com, don't let that deter you. They have some of the most competitive and cheapest international shipping rates around, so you can still save a ton. And you're not going to get a huge hit there on the shipping, so you still can save a bunch of money. So again, don't let that little extra bonus deter you at all. You still can save a bunch of money. With all that being said, let's jump back into the whole premise of this top 50 countdown, or my top favorite countdown. Again, like I said, it was inspired by when Collider did their greatest comic book superhero movie countdown of all time. Again, I just was like, I took a little bit of different factors because I watched the countdown and it was really presented really uniquely. It was a YouTube video. It was edited. It was very high production value. And they did a video each day where they had different panelists talk about why they chose that movie, why they voted it, where they voted it, and then it was a whole system to it. So it was a consensus decision on what movies ranked where, and I didn't always agree with them, and a lot of people didn't, and they had a chance to talk about them, and some were controversial, some were not, some were like, okay, I agree with that. It just all depends. I thought this, I'm a single person podcast. I have a very close relationship with you guys as the listeners, so I could just give my honest opinion of what I think and what movies. And I was kind of surprised because certain movies you think, hey, well, this is a groundbreaking movie for this reason or that reason. And I try to take all of that out of the equation and just got to as a comic book fan, what movies of all the different movies that have been released to this point will I go back to? Certain movies, have I watched it more than once? I saw it in the theater. I might have owned it, in my home collection, but do I ever go back and watch it? When was the last time I watched the movie? So certain movies, to see how I felt and like ranking them against another movie to come up with a definitive list. I went back and rewatched a lot of movies. Some I had seen kind of recently, but hadn't put into context against another movie. So I did a lot of watching the movies, different, superhero movies. I have a pretty decent sized collection in, my archive because I'm just a comic book fan. So I tend to gravitate to, mostly any live action comic book movie that comes out. I pretty much added into my collection. So I went back and, like I said, watched a ton of movies, and just as a fan, just have fun with it. Plus, with Black Panther coming out since I initially did this, and then Infinity War right on just a couple of months away. Some of it worked as a refresher to going back, rewatching some of the stuff with the MCU and how it all connects. And that changed a lot with the more movies coming out, and seeing a movie that I might thought of lesser of before, but seeing how it all played out and connected the bigger picture. Those movies to me have a little bit more, it resonates more now because now we have the end game. We've seen the end game and seen 2 or 3 movies or 4 or 5 movies later, and see how, if you took that movie out of the equation, how it would affect the whole chain of events. So I used a lot of different factors, but and I tried to keep out things such as just what other people think of movies, because everyone has their own opinion. Not every movie strikes the same with everyone else. It's just like I said with my Black Panther review. Certain things are all about perspective and a certain point of view, and not everyone's going to feel the same about everything. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion. So these choices are just my opinions of what I deem at this point in time, and it can change down the road. You just never know. But at this point in time, what are kind of my top 50 favorite comic book movies. And again, I do apologize that it hasn't been more episodes out this month. Like I said, it's been like the past 2 months have been extremely crazy for me. Like I told you guys, I had a lot of health issues. Ended up finding out that I had a staph infection in my lower body, so I was dealing with that, and I wasn't almost caught in time, didn't know what was going on. So I've, just been going through a lot just physically. It's been hard to kind of sit up to a microphone and like record. And I've been in extreme amounts of pain and on different medication and antibiotics. It seems like I'm finally coming through the tail end of this, all the and if you know anything about staph infections, people die from those if untreated and unchecked. So this was not what I expected. How I expected my new year to start off, and it unfortunately has affected me personally when it comes to producing the show and videos. I tried to look for ways around it, but just it's a pain element there too, and I don't want to have to do something when I'm making content for you guys. So I when I felt well enough I've tried to do what I could when I could, but again, in the time that I've been kind of going through all this over the past 2 months, it's been a kind of blessing in disguise in a way, because it allowed me to kind of get back to some of the core basics of the show. I've read a ton of comics. I have a ton of episodes planned out for content to come in video form for the YouTube channel, as well as audio episodes that's going to be coming down the pike. I'm kind of separating things out in more movie reviews, like cutting the stack episodes where I'm doing bulk comic reviews, and I'm going to be doing more because you guys seem to really resonate with me doing like a particular publisher. So I'll be doing more of those kind of episodes. So it'll be another Marvel cutting the stack, DC, Valiant, Image. I'm going to be trying to jump around, and I've read a ton of different comics and been reviewing those. So those will be rolling out on the YouTube channel. It'll be things like movie reviews. I'll still stick with the format for the bigger movies. So when Solo comes out, I'll do a review. A spoiler review here, a non-spoiler review on the YouTube channel. So all that kind of stuff I have in the works planned as those things come up, as I see those movies. I've watched a few animated films. I normally would do those reviews during the podcast, but I'm starting to do some of that more short form stuff for the YouTube channel. So I know I'll have a review for Gotham by Gaslight. That'll be coming on the YouTube channel soon. And I'll have a comic book collectors series it'll be just exclusively to the YouTube channel. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out, definitely stop by youtube.com/comic book savant, because it is slightly different content and certain things like television, TV show reviews and movie reviews, non-spoiler movie reviews anyway. That kind of content will be exclusive to the YouTube channel. And all the series that you've gotten to know and like here will still be here. But again, just switching it up and giving you guys different options. And like I said, trying to grow as a creator, doing different and better stuff for you guys. So, again, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, take a moment to do that, because I do put out different content than what you get here on an audio podcast. With all that being said and all that out of the way, when it comes down to the first 10 movies that I'm going to want to talk about, number 50 for me on my favorite comic book movies of all time has to be Superman Returns. It came out in 2006. We had Brandon Routh playing Clark Kent and Superman. This is more so, and I've talked about this repeatedly, over the years of me doing the podcast, that I've never been a huge Superman fan as far as in the comics. I really enjoyed the Timverse Adventures of Superman that came out around the same, shortly after the Batman animated series came out, when WB was putting those out. That's probably been my best or favorite depiction of the Superman character. And I've had a few spots in the comics where I dug certain things or certain stories, but this movie more so, this is it was directed by Bryan Singer, which worked under Richard Donner back when he was working on the Superman movies many years ago. That, it's a whole story, the Donner cut of Superman 2, where he was filming Superman 1 and 2 due to budget issues and all that kind of things. Richard Donner was kind of unceremoniously booted off the project, and one of his staff members kind of betrayed him, took over it, and finished the movies. Well, Superman Returns was always, since Singer had this reverence for Donner, he kind of did a spiritual sequel to the seeds that were planted in the first two movies by Donner before he was removed. And it wasn't what the Superman franchise needed. I think what always stands out, I thought Brandon Routh, because it was a weird thing for Brandon Routh, and I love him now playing Ray Palmer on Legends of Tomorrow on the CW shows. He's made that character his own, and I identify him more as Adam than I do as Superman. And I felt like it was so many things going against this movie, because it could have worked better if they just did a totally new story. But it was, they picked him to kind of reprise the role that was made famous and to be played similar to what was already done by Christopher Reeves, which is iconic as that role, and he kind of had him play like an imitation of him, which wasn't fair to Brandon Routh. But it's some beautiful visuals throughout the movie that just always to me felt very iconic to Superman. Like when he captures the plane and puts it down in the baseball stadium, things like that were just, to me, iconic imagery. So what gets on this list for me is that I didn't initially care for the movie that much, but over the years, as I've watched it over and over, it visually, it's like certain times movies just hit you in a certain way. And like, if I want to see that iconic, godlike hero, like in his best and those iconic visuals, I feel like this movie nailed that so well. Now the story, that's a whole nother subject, but just more so visual. This movie's a visual treat than anything else, and that's kind of why it made my top 50 list. Was more so for the visual achievements, more so than the story achievements. And again, it's grown on me over time, but again, it's more visually that what pulls me into the movie than the actual story itself. Number 49 for me would be Blade 2, which was the follow-up to the immensely popular Blade that came out in, I want to say it was 1999, or 98, excuse me. I think Blade 1 was 98, my bad. This was action-packed, directed by Guillermo del Toro, which I think to that point in time was the first time I've seen anything that he's directed. It was a really cool concept. I feel like over the years, Blade 2 has lost a little something. It was definitely visual effect heavy, and the visual effects really don't hold up extremely well over the time. And it's kind of crazy when I go back and I watch Blade 1 to Blade 2. It was more practical effects used in Blade 1. I mean, outside the third act, which, the movie, even at the time it came out, it kind of, got a lot about the special effects towards the end of the first Blade movie, that third act. And this movie it just has lost something over the time. So this would have been higher on the list for me, but over the years and just better movies that have came out, it's definitely a movie of its time. Again, it was back in 2002, so the visual effects they just were too visual effect heavy, and again, it was just a product of the time, coming off The Matrix and things like that. A lot of special effects were overdone in certain movies at a point, and it just definitely, you could tell, like, okay, this is a early 2000s movie, like when you watch it now. But great action, Wesley reprising the role, good story, good job done by Guillermo del Toro directing. But it still deserves to be on the list. And it's still a movie I go back to again and again and will watch. It's just a fun watch. 48 for me will be Iron Man 3. This came out in 2013. This is the last movie of the Iron Man trilogy. This is directed by Shane Black, and a lot of different things can be said on it. When I originally reviewed the movie, I had an issue about how the third act was handled and the handling of the Mandarin, and I felt a certain way about that. But I really disliked this movie when it originally came out. Over the years, I've watched it a few more times, and I appreciate it a little bit more as time went on. For Tony's overall story arc, and seeing how he evolved, and him still dealing with the events coming out of the first Avengers movie and the PTSD, and him just trying to adjust back to normal life and trying to have a semblance of a normal life. And it does a really good job setting up the seeds of things that came later with Age of Ultron as well. So I have a better appreciation for the movie. It's still probably, if I had to look at all of the movies as a whole, it's a decent movie. It's not a movie, I probably, out of the 3 Iron Man movies, the one I would go back to the most would be Iron Man 1. But I would watch this every so often. Like I said, I've, since it originally came out, I've watched it a handful of times. I've watched other movies way more. But again, I have a better appreciation. I don't totally, dislike the movie. I see more merits in the movie over time. To appreciate it a little bit more. So that's number 48 for me. Number 47 is Sin City. This came out back in 2005. This was an adaptation of Frank Miller's, and I think this was on the Dark Horse imprint that he did Sin City. Visually, it had a very unique style. It was directed by Richard Rodriguez. And I think Frank Miller did some directing. I remember, I think he directed a scene or two. He was very closely involved in the production of the movie. But I think he directed more scenes in the follow-up Sin City: A Dame to Kill For. But Sin City was a really great movie. I remember going to see this at the movie theater. They incorporated a lot of green screen and special effects. But they incorporated the original style and original art style of Frank Miller. They did a really good job of capturing it. It was definitely super gritty, R-rated, kept the spirit within the spirit of the comic itself, and it's a movie that I feel like that kind of gets it's underappreciated. You don't hear people, at the time it was very innovative, but we're looking at it's 13 years later, and you don't hear a lot of people talk about Sin City when you hear conversations come up about comic book movies. But at the time it was really groundbreaking, and it did a lot of cool things. And again, when talk comes up so much about Deadpool and Kick-Ass later about those, or Kingsman about being rated R comic book movies and how that was such a big thing. Just movies on this list that I've already talked about, I want to say Blade 2 was rated R. Maybe was it? I know the first Blade was rated R. I want to say the second one was as well. I think the only one in the trilogy that wasn't rated R was the Blade trilogy, which was the final movie, and I think that was, I want to say that was PG-13. Then Sin City was rated R as well. And those movies both were very successful in the movies. Not on the scale, because again, the genre wasn't what it is at this point in time. But definitely, back in 2002 and 2005, the box office was a lot different, but they both were very successful. Number 46 for me is Watchmen. This came out back in 2009, directed by Zack Snyder. I thought this was a fairly good adaptation of the Watchmen. I was never a huge, multiple occasions, and I remember this at the time when the movie was coming out. I had bought the Watchmen trade, and I'm like, I'm going to read this before the movie comes out. And it was a whole year before the movie was going to come out, and I read 3 or 4 pages of the graphic novel. I just couldn't. It just was a product of the mid 80s. I'm a kid of the 80s. but it was more for like the college kids of that time frame. It was very heady, very political heavy, and I just couldn't get into it even as an adult. Going back trying to read it, it was very dense and just hard for me to get into. So I never got a chance to end up reading it the way I wanted to know the source material going into watching the movie. But the thing I did, which was interesting, I saw the movie. I thought it was visually a good movie, and I thought story-wise, I enjoy Watchmen. It's not, it's a very different, when you talk about other movies that's on this list, it's a very different take on superheroes, which that was what made the Watchmen graphic novel so, prominent in its time when it came out in the mid-'80s, 45. Translated into a film, I think visually it just showed the how great that Zack Snyder is visually translating from the printed medium to a fluid medium like motion pictures, and just the visuals throughout I thought were just really, really eye-catching and mind-boggling. And it was kind of crazy. Like I never forget, I went with a group of friends. We went to see the movie. I came home. I had a graphic novel still like sitting on my desk in my office, and I opened it up and I look at the panels, and so many of the panels from the comics were represented in the movie. Like I could remember frames. Like if I freeze frames from the movie, you could pull those out and put it side by side and see them. And it was just done extremely well. Always appreciated it about that movie. It just gets messy because it's been multiple cuts of the movie. It's like the theatrical cut of Watchmen, then it is they did the animated. They animated the kid reading the comic, the Black Freighter. Okay, hold on. Let me say this right. So it was the theatrical cut, then it was the director's cut, because I remember when I bought that initially on DVD or Blu-ray, I got both of those in that. And then they did a separate thing that you got the Black Freighter animated portion that they did. It was a separate thing. It was never on either of the theatrical cuts. And then they had a ultimate that was like close to 4-hour cut of Watchmen. That was the ultimate like director's cut, Snyder cut, which had the ultimate director's version of it with the anime of the Black Freighter incorporated, I guess, how it was in the initial graphic novel incorporated in. Excuse me. And it's like 4 hours. It's like long. I watched it once. I don't think I would ever go back and watch that version again because the animated thing is interesting, but I don't think it carries the same context as it might in the graphic novel itself. And it just was like weird and just felt off-putting and kept us away from the actual story in the movie itself with the main characters. So it just that version didn't work. I normally just watch the regular director's cut of Watchmen. Also, another rated R superhero movie that was, Watchmen was very successful, and it did extremely well in the box office. So again, when people say Deadpool is the first superhero movie, rated R superhero movie, it wasn't. I'm giving you multiple examples in just this first episode on movies that came out and were successful movies that also were rated R. Next movie for me, this is not a direct superhero movie, and it's based on a comic book, but I always felt like from the first moment I ever saw this movie, it should be classified. Most people don't know about this movie. This movie didn't do extremely well in the box office, but I love this movie, and I was able to get it digitally not too long ago. I went to the movies to see this. This movie's called Push. It came out in 2009. It was Chris Evans actually stars in this movie. It's Chris Evans, Dakota Fanning, and the African actor. I cannot remember his name. I'm seeing his face. He plays the gatekeeper in the Guardians movies. I'm seeing his face, but I can't remember, and so excuse me. Somebody will probably yell at me. Hold on, let me just look it up because it's bothering me now. because I can't remember his name. Don't you hate that when you know something and it just doesn't click in your memory the way you want it to? Push. What is his name? Diamond Hanzu. I knew it. I knew him. He also stars in a movie, which is funny because we know that Chris Evans later goes on and plays in Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, as well as Damon Hanzo as well. They both went later and played different actual superhero roles. And also, Wen Meng Wen was in the movie as well, which is one of the actors on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So it's funny when you go back and look at this movie, it's kind of like a who's who of people later that played around in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, be it on TV or movies. So 3 of the main actors in the movie ended up being in superhero movies later, which is kind of, funny when you look at it. And that's why, Push kind of resonates with me, because it was about, different sets, of people with mutant abilities. They were very much presented as mutant abilities, and, they were being and it very inadvertently carry themes of like the X-Men being persecuted by the government and being used for weapons, biological weapons, basically for the government and this government agency. And it was, it just never caught on. It was at a weird time before we really got into that renaissance of the bigger movies. And I think at the time Chris Evans had already played the torch. I think this might have been right after the second Fantastic Four movie, but before, of course, he started playing Captain America. But it's a really good movie. It holds up extremely well. It didn't have a huge budget. I always wish they would have had a sequel, but again, he later, not too long later, got casted as Captain America, and that pretty much shut this down. And I don't think it made a ton of money. This was an indie movie that just kind of caught my eye. I went to the movies to see. Me and my best friend, I remember we went to go see this movie, and it's like one of those forgotten movies, but it holds up extremely well, and it fits in to the comic book superhero genre extremely well. They had telekinesis and mind readers for people that could see into the future. There was a lot of different superhero-ish powers that were represented throughout the movie. So I had to include. I always think of it, and I think I did a most underrated superhero movie countdown episode some years ago, and I included this movie in. So I had to include it because I can go back and watch this movie. I've watched this movie tons of times over the years, and again, I tell you guys, I pretty much go digital with everything now. And I went back and found it. It was, for a while I couldn't find it. I had it on maybe DVD. I don't think I had it on Blu-ray. And when I got rid of all my Blu-rays and DVDs, I finally have found it on iTunes a couple years back, and I've watched it quite a few times since then. It's a really good movie. I don't know if you can find. I don't know if Push is even like on Netflix or anything like that, but I think I got it for like $10 or $12 on iTunes. So you probably can find it for purchase or rent on one of the like streaming services if you look. But it's a really good movie. Chris Evans, like I said, in between him playing Human Torch and right before he started playing Cap in this movie, Dakota Fanning, Hanzu, I can't never pronounce his first name properly, and I butchered it, and I apologize. But next up for me, my number 44 movie is Wanted. Though if you ever read the Image comic book Wanted, that was done by Mark Millar, and who did the artwork for that? I'm going blank. I can't remember who did the artwork for Wanted, the comic book. Oh, I'm sucking today when it comes to this. I'm batting 1,000. But it's really not reviews. It's really doing this countdown. But I want to give you guys some context on why, certain books, why they resonated with me and why I placed them where I did. And I can't find it. Boom. Mike Millar and J.G. Jones was the artist for the Wanted comic book. This was an Image Top Cow comic. I think it came out. The comic book itself came out back in 2003. It was a miniseries. It took off. It did extremely well, and then it got optioned for a movie. Now, with this being said, though this is a superhero / comic book movie, it is nothing like the comic book whatsoever. I will say that up front. But this had James McAvoy and Angelina Jolie in the movie. It was, I can't even say this was loosely based. This was, I guess it was general ideas of the original comic story was adapted, but it was, when I say very loosely, it was like transparent loose how this was adapted. But it was fun. It's like dumb fun. This is a dumb fun action movie. They do things where it's they're curving bullets and all this crazy kind of stuff. It's way different. Like I said, it was way different from the original source material. It's no way they could have really done Wanted a true adaptation of it. It would be, if you've seen the trailers for Ready Player One and how a lot of different pop culture references are referenced in that movie all over the place, and they finally have allowed that. Ready Player One has been bounced around for adaptation for over like 25 years, and it's just now that they pulled it off. Maybe someday when things opens up, or after Disney buys everything, we can get a true Wanted film adaptation, but because it's analogs of a lot of different superhero characters from a lot of different other companies. J.G. Jones was a super photorealistic artist. The main character in the comic was basically drawn off of sketches of Eminem. The Angelina Jolie role, so the James McAvoy role would have been played by Eminem. The Angelina Jolie role in the comic was basically Halle Berry. So it was Batman analogs, Superman analogs. It was a lot of things that would prevent it in its true form to be a true adaptation that could make it to film and pull off. It would be a lot of legal red tape, and if they got to get the rights to kind of do these analogs and pull them into the movie properly, that would be the whole budget of the movie, just trying to clear those at least those rights to do it. It would eat up a huge budget. But the adaptation, like I said, this is a dumb fun movie. It's going to make you laugh. It has some cool action scenes in it, but if you've never seen Wanted, the 2008 movie, but you've read the Wanted comic and you then now wanted to see a movie because I brought it to your attention, it is nothing like the source material. Just know that going in, nothing like it. But it's fun. It's fun. It's a fun popcorn action flick, though. So that's number 44 for me. Number 43 is Red. This is adapted from a Vertigo graphic novel or limited series that was really popular as a graphic novel, based on a retired CIA agent that's I think is Red stands for Retired and Extremely Dangerous. It's very loosely based off the original source material as well. A lot of DC, and DC has had more success with their movies than what people let on. They did a lot of like these Vertigo movies. Red was one. I'm going to talk about another one in just a moment, where they took this, that they were small runs, because Vertigo was kind of their creator collab collaboration imprint that they've had for years. So they would do a lot of more experimental, pushing indie, kind of like indie movies division, but in comics. And Red worked. It's really fun. It has Bruce Willis, Helen Mirren, John Malkovich, Morgan Freeman. And I apologize for the bird chirping. I hear it in my headset, so I know you guys will hear it. I really apologize. Again, apartment living sometimes sucks, and I got to deal with the elements around when I'm recording. So I hope it's not coming through too loud. I think it finally stopped for now. But Red came out in 2010. They actually did a sequel. Both movies were fun. Again, sometimes you just want to watch a fun popcorn action movie. Wanted, Red, they fall in pushes a little bit deeper, but Wanted and Red especially falls into that category of just dumb, fun, it's going to make you laugh, you're going to see some cool action, kind of popcorn action movies that are, comic book superhero based. That's number 43 for me. Following that up, another movie that also came out in 2010, also a Vertigo book, is The Losers, which was a series that ran, I want to say The Losers ran about 50 issues, and the comics or Vertigo. This is another one that falls in the same category as Wanted, Red, Losers. Now, with The Losers. Now, The Losers is more tightly adapted from the source material than these other two movies are. This one also, Chris Evans was in this movie. He played a character in this movie. We have Idris Elba, Jeffrey Dean Morgan. Oh gosh, I'm trying to think about all the other people. There's other people I can remember off the top of my head, but it's a star-studded cast. These guys went on also and did most of the people have done superhero movies, be it for Marvel or DC, after this, bigger profile movies. And again, fun popcorn action movie that's based on a graphic novel. Just really fun. I love watching The Losers. I wish they would have done more, but again, due to obvious reasons of, shortly thereafter, Chris Evans becomes, Captain America, Idris Elba becomes Heimdall, people branched off and did other stuff. So it didn't make it possible. Jeffrey Dean Morgan, years later became Negan. So, a lot of these characters still went on to play bigger roles and bigger comic book characters down the road. So I'll take that in the trade-off any day. And again, that's my number 42 selection. And last but not least for this first episode and first countdown, the last one on the list is Superman, the 1978 Superman with Christopher Reeves. Again, this might be sacrilege to some people because it might be higher on their list. I'm a kid of the 80s, and I grew up with this movie. I know we would not have everything that we have now if it wasn't for this movie. Get it, got it, good. Don't like the movie. Never liked the movie. Even as a kid in the 80s, I just never liked it. I loved Christopher Reeves as Superman, but again, I was never a Superman fan, so it just didn't resonate with me like that. I watch it. I've watched it. I appreciate it. I don't own it in my collection. No, I don't own this in my collection at all. No, I don't. I had to think about it, but no, I don't. So it's one of those things that for nostalgia, every once in a while, I'll if it's on TV or something, I'll sit down and watch it, but it just never, Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor, his comedic take on the Luthor character, I never could get into. It was just so many things about it. Like I said, it's a product of its time, and I understand the historical importance of the movie, but just as a fun factor, as a comic fan, is this a movie that I go back to and, do I have to watch Superman every year or every few years? Nah. I can honestly can't tell you the last time I sat down to watch this movie. It's been a while. Because I just don't feel it like that. But I understand its importance, and I honor it for that. And I love Christopher Reeves as he made me believe, he sold me on that a man could fly. You know what I mean? But everything else with the movie, it's just so 80s. And again, I'm a kid of that time, and it's just really corny. But I appreciate it for what it is, but at the same time, it was just corny. And you probably think, if you're younger, probably think, what does he mean by corny? Then that's a whole nother problem, because I'm an old man. But it just never, again, resonated or clicked with me as a fit. But I do appreciate the movie as a comics fan. So that is the first 10 on the greatest comic book movies list. Again, it's going to be an ongoing series. I'll do just how, depending how the lineup falls, I'll probably do it over the next few months, and I'll do, one episode each month to kind of space it out with the other content I'm doing. I don't want to just do like for a month straight, giving you nothing but these episodes. So they'll be spaced out. So again, just to go over the first 10, we have Superman Returns at 50, Blade 2 at 49, Iron Man 3 at 48, Sin City at 47, Watchmen at 46, Push at 45, Wanted at 44, Red at 43, The Losers at 42, and Superman, the Superman movie, or Superman, is at 41. So again, the next episode will keep counting down till we get to the number one selection. I will I'm including movies that are out at this point. So Black Panther will be included somewhere on the list. I think by the time I started to like Thor Ragnarok, those newer movies that came out as of this date. So as I'm counting down, I won't be adding anything else. But that'll be left for updates later, that we'll do updated lists as more movies come out. There'll just be update episodes where, and I'll go over where they rank on the list and what they might have replaced, or, how it affected the list overall. But that'll come over, in time. So no worries there. If you want to reach me, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, at Comic Book Savant. You have the Facebook page. It's facebook.com/Comic Book Savant. Again, don't forget the YouTube channel. Please take a moment and subscribe. If you want to help support the show, you can become a Patreon. If you like what I do, you enjoy the content that I put out on a monthly basis, you can go into patreon.com, and it's patreon.com/Comic Book Savant. And you can become a patron. Again, if you can't contribute anything financially, I totally understand that. And it's other ways you can help support the show as well. Send in questions, follow me on social media, send questions in to me on social media. You can leave an iTunes review if you've never done that before. Take a moment to do that. All those kind of things help grow the show and help get more eyes on the show. Like I said, I've had setbacks going into this year so far, but I'm still on the things that I talked about you guys in the beginning or the end of last year, beginning of this year, about how I want to expand the show, how the show will transition into different things I do. I'm still set to do all those things. Again, so any support you guys could offer, be it financial, be it moral, it's a lot of different ways you can support. So if you can't do it financially, I just appreciate you being a listener and a follower. But again, if you can, that is always, it will help go towards keep advancing the show and the quality of the show, the quality of the YouTube videos, things of that nature. I thank you guys for listening. I'll be back again next week with another episode of Comic Book Savant. Check out the website. If you've never been to comicbooksavant.com, all the links and everything that I mentioned, you can email me directly from there as well. All that kind of stuff. You can just go there. It's a one-stop shop. Videos are posted there. Links to my YouTube videos are posted there. Links to all the episodes for the audio podcast are listed there as well. And it's a searchable database. You can search through all 368 episodes. If you want to look to see if I covered a particular topic or subject, you can do it by just, it's a search box there, and the whole back catalog is searchable, so you can do that as well. So if you have a moment, do that. Again, I will see you guys next week for another episode, and you guys have a good week, and take care.
And into lyrical wholeness, and I know this, and I know this. This I know, this I know.